Hi, I'm Norman Buckley. I'm from Facet, one of the original authors. Here in Warsaw for the second time. Very proud to be here to talk about Facet, to help our partners here. We see Facet as a pathway tool that helps all aspects of management development, and the big areas we're concentrating on at the moment are leadership.
Now I want to talk to you now about what we've been doing with Facet. When each person completes a Facet profile, that's great for that individual or for the people around. It's great for me too, because it's data, and I love data. So it builds up, and we now have well in excess of 300,000 cases of data from around the world. And one of the things that I've been watching for the last few years is what are the differences? Because we all know stereotypes. We all know that Germans are like this. We all know that Poles are like that. And the English are different again. Is that true? Well, Facet can help you get a feel for that. Because by the time I've got 300 and something thousand cases of data, I can start to look at that. The first time, or the first piece of information that emerged was, I thought, well, I better have a look what Australians are like and compare them to the English. Because when you go to Australia, I don't know where I am anymore, Australians think of themselves as being brave and adventurous. They're not. They're actually extremely conservative. You can tell that by the amount of rules and regulations that we have out there. We've got a rule for everything. The English, they've got some rules, but they ignore them. So it doesn't matter very much. So what I'm going to do now is to show you the results of some of this analysis. This is based on nearly 9,000 profiles from Poland. So Nina has been responsible for every single one of those, so there's a lot of data. It's almost exactly divided between men and women, almost exact. So when we look at that, we say, well, how do they compare? Let's have a look. Now I'm going to use the Facet terms. Each of you in your folders will have that page. We're going to go into it in detail later on, but in order to help understand what I'm talking about, that could be a useful page to have. This is the distribution for will. The big red triangle is where Poland sits. At the high end, we've got high will. Now, what's high will mean? What is will about? Will is about being determined, being very goal-oriented, being very stubborn, being willing to argue, and that's at the high end. People at the low end are much more flexible, they listen to others, they accept other people's ideas, they're much more tolerant of that kind of thing. Poland are stubborn, determined, committed, all of those things, goal-oriented.
What is German?
German, you've got me, because when I did these slides, Germany slipped off the slides. But I happen to know where it is.
Okay.
Where do you think it would be?
Higher than Colombia.
Higher than Poland?
Yes. No?
It's not higher than Colombia, but it's in there.
Okay.
Okay. So you're absolutely right on that. So the stereotype is true. Germans are stubborn, but so are Polish. Okay. Look at the other end of the scale. Down we have the Middle East, Indonesia. In fact, it's all Asia down there. Korea, Hong Kong, Bahrain is down there. And Australia is down there too. So that's a big difference. If you look at the one end to the other, there's quite a big difference there. Yeah, yeah, there are big differences there. By the way, I just want to clarify, in order to be classified as Polish or German or whatever, you must have completed the questionnaire in that language. Because it might be a Polish person who's in America, but they chose to do it in Polish. Therefore, I made the assumption that by nature they are Polish. Okay? Because if you start to just do it by where they completed the questionnaire, it gets all mixed up. So, this is what we have with Will. And I'm just going to jump around a little bit here, because one of the key themes that came out of this was that the leader of the future needs to be a listener. High will people are not good at listening. They are good at telling.
Yes.
Okay? So this is the first one. Energy, often called extroversion, but it's to do with enthusiasm, being a social person, enjoying the company of other people. Okay? You're in the middle. You're about the same as most people. Out here, there's Germany.
Yes.
She's in there.
Thanks.
Denmark, Lithuania, Bulgaria. They're pretty enthusiastic kind of people. Go to the other end. Namibia, it's only a very small set of cases. But again, Asia is down at the other end. Asians, I don't know who's worked in Asia or had a lot to do with Asia. Are there people here who've worked in Asia? Yeah. It can be very hard to know what Asian people are thinking, because they don't tell you.
Yes.
It doesn't mean they're not thinking, it just means that they're not going to tell you. The average Bulgarian will tell you what they're thinking. So will people, Brazilians. Oh boy, we do a lot of work in Brazil. It's very tiring by the end of the day. But Poland's around about the middle. So that seems like fine, not an issue. Affection. Affection is about largely altruism and trust and being supportive and understanding. Okay? Giving people a chance. Poland's towards the lower end of that. The top end, Italy, Indonesia, Canada, Norway, people like that, they're at the top end of that scale. At the very low end, one can't quite see, it's the Czech Republic down there, and Slovakia and Hungary and Russia and Germany. Coming back to Germany, you've got very high will and not very trusting. So they know what they think, and they think you're an idiot. So, but Poland's down at the lower end. And one of the things that's often not clear about affection is they don't like things to be complicated. They want them to be simple. They want an actual answer to this. Germany and Poland both want to get an answer. I want it now, I want it simple, and I'm going to tell you. If you haven't got it, I'll tell you what the answer is. But again, that might raise some questions about some of the characteristics that were being looked at here. What's going on? Control? Okay. Serbia, Bulgaria, Spain, China is quite high on control. They manage things very carefully. Australia is quite high. The way in our facet world, we actually all look up to Tracy because she's got 5.5. If you averaged everybody else in facet, we don't make 3. So we admire that, and we look at it. She makes notes. She knows what's happening. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. It's often a mystery to us what's happening, but not to Tracy. She knows. So. If you go to the other end, there are 3 at the bottom end. That's Netherlands, Sweden and Germany. The Netherlands has no control. They are, if you look at Netherlands historically, they are traders. They dominate the world, their world, in trading. They just go out and do it. And they've done it for hundreds of years. Sweden the same. Now, Germany. There are 2 things that are very interesting, 2 examples out of Netherlands and Germany. Most countries where you go to, they will say there is a problem with traffic control, accidents, people getting injured, and the usual solution, certainly in Australia, it's paint more lines on the road, put more rules in, stop people from doing things. Both Germany and Netherlands took a reverse approach, and Netherlands did it first. A little place called Bompte. They actually took all of the signs away. They got rid of the traffic lights, and they basically said there are no rules. These are cars, those are people. You need to find a way of working. The accident rate dropped pretty close to 0. So this was a situation, this is exactly what a low control person would do. They say, take the rules away. How many managers do you know who would be happy to run their business by taking all the rules away?
None.
None. Nobody is brave enough to do it. And yet, whenever it's tried, it might work. What happens if you think about this? Those of you who have very low control, and in a group this size, there's a number of you. What do you do when somebody tries to control you? You resent it. You challenge it. If you can't just challenge it, you start to make up games. And say, I have to have your expenses report by the 3rd day of the new month. And you say, yeah, maybe. How about the 4th day, 5th day, something like that? Grant and I have a friend, also a client, who I think we almost had to redo the scale because he had such low control. And he worked for a large bank, and he was always being chased and harassed for his expenses reports and the receipts for it and all of this. Then he changed to a different bank. And he said, it's fantastic here. I haven't got these same rules, they're very relaxed about it, I haven't got to present the receipts, they're terrific. And the one rule he'd forgotten about was that there's a 3-month limit. And he had, at that point, when that 3-month was triggered, he was owed about $7,000 in expenses that he hadn't bothered to claim back. And he had to go back and explain to his wife why suddenly they were $7,000 out of pocket. And so there was just one rule, but unfortunately it was a big one. And that's what will happen to low control people. The rule of thumb is a low control person thinks that they can do anything until they are told they can't. A high control person thinks they can't do anything until they are told that they can. So they run themselves by the rules. So, what's going to happen here? You would suspect that if Poland is towards the high end, when it comes to changing what it means to be a leader, Poland is going to look for the set of rules. Show me how to do this. Give me a set of guidelines, how I change leadership. I don't have those guidelines. I don't know whether anybody has. Here's emotionality. Now, again, it's a big room. We have people in here who are at the very high end. We have people in here at the very low end. By the way, down at the very low end, our friends from the Netherlands are down here as well. So not only do they not care about any rules, but they don't care about whether there are any rules. It'll be fine. It'll be okay. At the high end, Russia is in there. Lithuania is in there. I think that does explain something about Russia, because you've got a combination now of relatively low affection, very high emotionality. If you put those two together, you get a very dark view of the world and a very defensive and suspicious view of the world. If you look at Russia's, particularly its literature, it's very heavy into dark scenes of problems that have to be overcome, and they're big problems. Dostoevsky was not a light-hearted writer. Yeah, this is their lived reality. They tend to impose it on others as well, but yeah. So these things do start to come through. Poland's in the middle. You're no more emotional or unemotional than anybody else. Now, we're often asked, when you look at Facet, what's a good profile look like? Well, I don't have an idea. I think anybody who's like me is pretty good. Pretty good. My wife disagrees, but she's spent 20 years trying to improve me. She's not that good. But if I was to pick one factor where there's an ideal point, I'd say it's somewhere in the middle on emotionality. Life's just easier if you're in the middle. If you're high, it makes you far more interesting, far more exciting. If you're very low, you're bulletproof. You can do anything and it doesn't bother you. That's the sort of picture that's emerging. Looks a bit like that. For this to make any sense, you have to go beyond it and say, well, so what? Is there any evidence that this comes across in any other way? Well, I'm sure people here know about an annual study called the European Social Survey, the ESS. There are two good things about that. One is they do it every year and it's a very big survey, and the second is that they allow you to download the data set, which of course I did immediately. 130,000 surveys across 30-odd countries, European countries, and it ranges, I think there's 500 questions in there. It covers everything from race, ethnicity, education, politics, but it also covers a lot of attitudinal things. What do you feel about this and that? And when you cluster them, I just picked out a few of them. One was about respect for tradition or valuing tradition. And on a scale from being very traditional to very non-traditional, Poland comes out as very traditional. Who's non-traditional? Iceland, Sweden, France, Finland. They're the ones that change the rules. In fact, they didn't really know there were rules. Who's down there? Israel, Italy, Hungary, Slovenia, Russia. Tend to be much more traditional. So this is an external thing. What facet factor would you associate tradition with? Any guess? Respect for tradition? Control. Poland was high. Okay. So it's coming through there as well. How about that? Trust. The least trusting nation across Europe is Poland. This is trust in institutions. So whether it's your politicians, your banks, your executive group, any of those things, this is how do I feel about this? Can I trust what I am told? Well, if you ask Polish people, they'll say, no, can't trust it at all. You don't know what they're going to say. Try it to the Norwegians. Yeah, it's fine. Whatever we're told is absolutely fine, because we've got really nice people in charge, and so that's great. Iceland, Finland, Sweden, Netherlands. We've got that cluster up there. Trust was coming up here consistently. It's been the theme of the morning, is about trust. That's going to be something else that has to be gone over. I don't have the answer. Just raising. Luckily, I haven't got to have the answer. I've just got to raise the questions. General happiness. How do you feel about life? Is it okay? There are two things that will lead into that when we looked at it. Emotionality and energy are two things that tend to lead into measures of happiness. Poland is coming out about average, fractionally below average. You're about as happy as other people, even though you don't trust them. Okay? And then you have sociability. Remember, sociability would largely be driven by energy, but it has questions in there such as how often do you meet groups of friends? How often in a week would you see people? This tells us what probably needs to be done. If the concept of leadership is changing, then these are the sorts of things that need to change. This is the whole idea of conversational leadership, of flat leadership. The original or long pursued idea of transformational leadership, of being the one charismatic person out front, I think it's over. I think it's gone. Part of that is due to the change in organizational structures with the rise of the, we call it the gig economy, but it's things like Facebook. It's the shift of power in organizations or in society. And if that's what's got to happen, then some cultures are going to find that easier to do than others. There are some aspects of this that, on average, Poland might have to work hard on. I will say one thing, though. These are averages, and they are averages across 9,000 people. In any group, you will have huge range. So some people will find it a lot easier to do than others. And that is, not everybody, if I split it down the middle, not everybody's the same. And if I split it by gender, and I looked at the numbers for men and women, there are differences. Any idea what the biggest difference between men and women is in facet terms? Which factor? No.
Affection.
No. It's emotionality. Women are slightly more emotional than men. Do you have an armed guard getting out of here? You're going to need it. No, this has been proven by every kind of test that's been done for the last 50 years. So it's not an issue. It's just one of those things. They also tend to be slightly lower on will, slightly higher on affection, pretty well the same on control and energy. So we want somebody to do this. They've got to be more willing to listen. Slightly lower on will would be helpful. They've got to be more caring about the people they're talking to. Slightly higher on affection would be useful. They have to be a bit more responsive, to feel a bit more compassionate, a bit more caring, and so on. On this basis, it looks like Polish women are more likely to make that transition than Polish men. Over to you guys. You're going to have to work on it. Thank you. That's all I have to say.